you doing today?
Awesome.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah.
Excellent. You sound like Mr. Burns. Excellent, Smithers. Excellent.
Well, it's kind of on brand for our topic today. It's fix or fire, managing up or managing out problem reps, which is a masterclass.
I don't think Mr. Burns has ever fixed anyone.
It's
Just
a fair
fired.
point.
He
It's a
just
fair
fires
point.
people.
Okay. Before we get started, as always, do want to start it off with a quick icebreaker. And of course, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. So want to ask, is there like a special dish or side that you guys are looking forward to?
Hmm. Peter, after you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go for probably like the most unhealthy option of just like
Yeah.
all the stuffing you can muster, just
hmm
doused in gravy. Just more
Just,
gravy than bread.
just,
Like
just
just all of it.
Just do it. Nice. Probably my favorite is like I've been a mashed potatoes like fiend ever since I was a little kid. I think it's like a gravy related thing, gravy adjacent, because like I think I just got like a lot of affinity by building kind of like mashed potato, volcanoes and like lakes with the gravy and what have you. Because then you can, it's a good way to like play with your food. So I think that's like it's like stuck around, and it certainly is stuck around my waist. That's for damn sure. What about
Um,
you, Elliot?
yeah, for me, very simple. Cream spinach out of a can. Just throw it in the
Ooh.
pan, heat it up. It's it's disgusting, but it tastes so good. I
Simple
can't help
math.
myself. Simple,
Yeah.
simple and easy. Okay, all right. I do see that we got a few more people in, so gonna kick us
Woohoo!
off. Yeah, so we're here today for the Fix or Fire Masterclass. As always, excited to get into this event, all the takeaways that we're gonna get out of it. Today's event is brought to you by the team here at Modern Sales Pros. If the slide would load, there we go. For
Nah,
those of
just
you who are
taking a
not,
taking a nap.
oh yeah, taking it easy this holiday break now. Um,
Ease it into the weekend. Gold cast is.
for those of you guys who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for which our members are able to get answers to questions that they struggle to solve on their own, and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you guys are going to be invited to join after this event. If you do like this event, you've liked our content overall, we did host a big 3-day RevX Fest in October. Super crazy, super fun. It was 24 events of amazing content and speakers. We have recordings from the CEO of Gainsight, Outreach, Highspot, and dozens of others just like them. Give me 1 second. Going to drop the link to those recordings in the chat. Awesome. So link to those recordings in the chat now. Before we dive in, do want to start with some housekeeping notes. So this first of all, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording and the key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. If there's any questions for our panelists, please do use the Q&A function, and they are going to do their best to get to them during the event. Awesome. So that's all on my end. Going to pass things over to you, Pete. Talk about Atrium, introduce yourself, and Peter. Take care.
All right, exciting. I'm gonna share my screen over here. Oh hi, Pedro. And then do this. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, here we go. All right. This way I can be more agile while I drive the slides. Yeah. So, hey everyone. Pete Kazanjian, one of the founders of Atrium. For folks who aren't familiar, Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales organizations, so sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve team performance. And one of the cool things about Atrium is super easy to set up. You just log in with your read-only connection to your Salesforce account, and within a few minutes, Atrium will show you how your reps are performing across hundreds of metrics, which is really helpful for a variety of use cases, including fixing or firing, right? Trying to figure out like what's going on with this rep. What can we do in order to help them be more effective, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. Cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about welcome agenda, why like a little bit of a diatribe, because as Peter knows, you'll meet the other people. We only hire people named Peter here at Atrium, and then we give you other names so you don't collide with Pete. But why you shouldn't. We're going to go on a little diatribe here about why you shouldn't ignore rep performance problems, and then we're going to talk about how to deal with them. And so, just really quick, I'll introduce myself. I'm the founder of Atrium. I also am responsible for all of our go-to-market stuff here. I guess the fancy term for that is the CRO. I also started a software company called TalentBin back in 2010 that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And subsequent to that, actually at TalentBin, I went from being a business generalist founder to our first seller, our first sales manager, and then a sales leader. And then subsequent to the acquisition, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started the Modern Sales Pros community. So that's a little bit on me. But more interestingly, we have the illustrious Peter Biro here today. Peter, affectionately known by everybody in our organization as Pedro. Vote for Pedro. Peter, can you share with folks a little bit about like what you spend your time doing here at Atrium, maybe the couple roles that you had before, just so folks kind of understand, like your familiarity with different sales motions and what have you?
Yeah, definitely. So hi, I'm Peter.
Hi.
I get to spend my days over here hanging out with sales managers, sales leaders, sales operations folks, even the occasional sales enablement master, just talking through data-driven sales management, any of their rep performance trend problems, just doing a lot of troubleshooting. It's a lot of fun. My background in selling has been everything from high velocity to kind of channel-based stuff in the dental industry, all the way through like HR tech at different levels. So seeing the gamut of a lot of different sales motions between that and working here and just partnering with a lot of awesome companies and sales leaders.
Yeah, the selling to salespeople is kind of fun, huh?
Oh, it's the best. Wouldn't trade it for anything. It's a lot more straightforward, less fluff. We get to the point.
Yeah, little different than selling HR, huh?
just a little bit.
Just a smidge. Awesome, cool. Well, before we get jamming, one of the things we'd love to offer everyone who's attending today, if you'd like to get a copy of some of my favorite books on sales management, 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach is like one of my favorites. It's written by Corey Bray and Hellman Sori. Crushing Quota, it's written as a narrative, as a novel, so it's like a super page turner. It's very fun. And then Michelle Vazana's Crushing Quota is a very data-driven sales management book. It's a little bit more technical and a little bit more like textbooky. Like these two things go together very well, like peanut butter and chocolate. And then of course, we'd be happy to send you a Atrium Coffee is for Coaches Yeti. Right? It's like coffees for closers, but it's coffees for coaches instead. Get it? It's funny. So we're going to go ahead and drop a link to sign up for that here in the chat. And all we ask in exchange for a quick disco chat with one of our lovely account executives over here. So we're going to talk a little bit about managing performance problems and kind of why people oftentimes don't want to do it. So I think one of the things that we have observed in working with now nearly 300 customers, and of course, like thousands and thousands of of opportunities who haven't become customers, is that oftentimes sales organizations, and specifically sales managers, so SDR managers, AE managers, really are just like not comfortable managing performance. Performance issues. No, sorry, they're comfortable managing high performance. go. Right? Yeah, keep going, guys. But like tackling performance problems, definitely something that that folks do not want to spend their time on, which is unfortunate because like that's literally your job. It's like literally your job. That's like what you exist to do. Like, and so let's go ahead and talk about a little bit as to why that's problematic here. So let's talk about like some of the reasons why it's really, really, really important to manage performance problems. So especially in the current environment, like problem number one would be reps who don't cover their own costs. And so let's just kind of use an example here of like, account executives who are going to cost you on target, 150K a year. Maybe that, their base is like half of that, so like 75K a year. But this nut is 13K, excuse me, per month. And so if they're bringing in less than 13K per month, they're literally burning cash. Now, the reality is that the AEs should be delivering, at least AEs that look like, kind of this format, should be delivering anywhere between like 40 to 60K per month in order to cover other parts of the organization, right? So like someone's got to pay for the engineers, someone's got to pay for the real estate, someone's got to pay for the SDRs, etc. But even before you get to that, like if you're under this, like you're literally burning cash, and like that's a huge problem. The other thing too is, and this is a little bit more kind of like pernicious, is that low performers are taking other people's at bats. And this is something that I think a lot of folks really don't kind of like think about or consider, is like they think about it from the standpoint of, oh man, this is unfortunate that this rep right here is underperforming from a win rate standpoint, and that sucks for him or that sucks for her. It actually sucks for your whole team. And importantly, because like most account executives are not fully utilized. Like, so if account executives aren't having north of like 20 customer facing meetings a week, which is like kind of the roof of like what someone can do from an effective seller standpoint, because like after that, like more than 4 meetings a day is like you're kind of on a treadmill. You're going to have a hard time with your follow-ups and so on and so forth. But most reps are not at this. Like we see across all of our customers, like usually they're average, like AEs are like AEs are averaging around like 10-ish customer facing meetings a week. That tells you that you can put more meetings on the calendar. Well, as long as that's the case, any opportunity that you're giving to a rep whose win rate is like dramatically lower than everybody else's, those other account executives would be more than happy to take those ops, right? And then they would probably close win them at a similar at their kind of like similar clip here. And so even though it's kind of, and so we don't think about that as managers necessarily, where, and you really should be, because like you as a manager are measured on your team's performance. So if you're funneling opportunities to somebody who's underperforming in that regard, you might think that you're doing them a favor, but you're actually, not only are you hurting your high performers who probably could like, who would be closing more business and making more commission, you're actually hurting yourself as a manager as well, because you're making it harder for your team to hit their full attainment. Peter, anything to kind of add to this when you've been kind of thinking about your or how you've been interacting with customers and what have you?
Yeah, the conversation I end up having with a lot of managers is really around this being like a game of averages, right? Like not thinking about things like win rates and like where your ops go in terms of like totals per person or total per team, but what is going to get the highest average across the team. So yeah, as Pete was saying, like candidly, like you're gonna give less pitches or at bats to Cloak and Dagger. In doing so, you might be raising your team average by letting Mrs. Quail, Tank Muddlefoot take those at bats and hit that ball.
Yeah. And I think that's actually, I mean, almost the metaphor that we're using here is maybe a little bit misleading, because when you think about baseball and at bats and what have you, and we do a lovely Moneyball and sales masterclass as well. That's kind of fun. But like, you can't have the best batters, right? Like, take all the at bats in baseball. You actually can in sales. Right, up until the point where someone is like over, like that's why I was specifying about like, as long as there's space on the calendar, then people can, as long as there's space on the calendar, then people can carry more opportunities. Like, so we can do that, right? Like you can give, and I suppose maybe basketball is the better metaphor here, which is like, give the ball to Steph Curry, give the ball to Steph Curry. We don't have to give it to somebody whose shooting percentages is not great. So then the other thing to kind of consider, and reason why it's important to proactively manage performance, is underperformance is definitely contagious. You can kind of see some examples of this here where, I mean, generally speaking, I forget who the general was, who, it might have been Stanley McChrystal, who talked about this, where, probably like 5 or 10% of your team are just going to be outperformant, and they're going to have this internal motivation of like outperformance. And irrespective of if they're surrounded by other folks or kind of like mailing it in and what have you, like they're just going to have that internal drive. And then like 10%, like your bottom 10% are going to be, really problematic and toxic. And ideally, we don't hire those folks, but if we identify them, we should get them the heck out of the organization as quickly as possible. And then you have this like middle 80%, who will kind of like drift in either direction. So if like you have an organization that has a culture of like, excellence and execution, they will rise to that occasion. But if they see like that underperformance and under execution is tolerated, and it made excuses for, not like they'll kind of like drift in that direction. And we see this like very commonly across our customers, where you see folks like when folks have underperforming reps, that they haven't appropriately performance managed, you can see other people kind of drifting in that direction. And like in this case, what you can kind of see here is, hey man, like if this person right here doesn't have to put in the calories, like why am I necessarily going to put in the calories? And then of course the bigger problem here is, it's less that underperformance is contagious, it's that your high performers here who are high execution, they don't want to hang out with people who are mailing it in. Like they'll go work somewhere in an environment with high execution, in an environment where they're recognized, in the environment where other people mailing it in are not not tolerated. And so that's like a really kind of scary thing, that if you tolerate underperformance, like you kind of like you get what you deserve, right? You're going to end up with only the underperformers and a bunch of people who've been dragged down to them, and then outperformers are going to be leaving the organization, and like that sucks, and you don't want that. And then the next thing is that, kind of this notion of underperforming new hires, like you onboarding and and ramping people to success is astronomically important. And if you're not doing a good job of like proactively, managing those, that recruit, excuse me, the onboarding and specifically the ramping process, and intervening where there are issues, well, you can end up with like, what is it called, failure to launch, right? Which is obviously extraordinarily problematic, especially in the current environment where like we need our reps to be, executing and performing not from day one, but like as soon as as soon as possible, we need those people getting to successes quickly. Peter, where have you kind of seen this performance management as relates to ramping showing up here in your customers?
Yeah, I think of two stories really quickly. It's kind of funny, like talking to sales managers, sales leaders all day, because a lot of people, they have an inkling that this is happening, right? Like the idea of like promoting your SDRs to an AE and picking the ones you think are going to be top performers is not new. Granted, once you see it in the data and are able to manage to it and be more proactive about it, it's pretty astonishing how much you miss if you're just doing that by gut, right? Like
Yeah.
I've worked for a couple different VPs of sales or heard stories from similar VPs of sales where part of their like, this is one example, like internal interview process for promotion onto a
Yeah.
sales team is, who do you hang out with in the org, right? To avoid, these people who are bringing down the averages. But that's only like one gut way of doing it. Really focusing on doing this with data so you can see that consistent trend. It's mind blowing for a lot of people, right? And
Yeah.
you don't want to bring down team averages by having the wrong person on the team.
Yeah, 100%. Yep. And so then and this is like maybe a little bit of like a more sophisticated problem to be worried about is, what we would kind of call like broken numbers and like a negative impact on your ability to fundraise. And so, what that essentially means is, if you have underperforming reps, what that will do is that'll make it such that you have a higher cost of sales. And so what that means is, because the cost of sales is a concept. When you've got your bookings, let's like say that you're booking $1 million in ARR a quarter, right? How much did that cost you from a marketing expense standpoint, from an SDR salary expense standpoint, from an AE salary expense standpoint? And that's essentially like your rough cost of sales, which will then get broken out into what's known as a magic number, which is essentially a measure of how efficient your go-to-market organization is at taking your product to to market. And so generally speaking, like a good magic number is going to be like around 1, where you're spending as much money, like you're spending $1 for every ARR that you bring in. If your magic number is above that, and your magic, like you're spending sorry, you're booking more revenue than than your dollars are costing, or like then it's costing, then that can be a good thing. But the problem is that if you have underperforming reps, right? So again, let's use our metaphor, our example that we had before, where say you have like 10 account executives and each of them should be doing, I don't know, 150K in bookings a quarter. You would be looking at a $1.5 million quarter there, right? But let's say that instead you're getting to a 900K quarter on those 10 account executives, and those account executives cost you, 150K OTE, 75K base there. That's going to make it such that your ratio is more problematic, and that's going to make you more like less attractive from a fundraising standpoint, right? Because essentially what you're going to be a more capital intensive business, or you won't be able to fundraise at all. And so one way to kind of think about this is like, it's almost like you need to get the underperformers off your books, because what they're doing is like they're making your metrics look like shit, right? So having account executives that are underperforming on your books are essentially like lowering your average bookings per AE, making it such that when somebody's like looking at your business and how efficient it is, like you might be still adding ARR from those account executives, but my goodness, at like what cost? And so especially in the current kind of fundraising environment, managing those reps is extremely important, because like you got to get them up, or you got to get them out of the organization, right? And so you can kind of see what an example looks like here, where this right here is an example of an organization that's having 4-month ramping cohorts, adding monthly net cash flow on a month-by-month basis here. So like every 4 months we add another cohort of reps here. And now look at this one right here, where like what you're doing is you're only getting these folks to success every 8 months or so. And so you can really see the difference between the success of the ramp of this organization versus this organization right here. Peter, is this something that that you've kind of been observing in your customers recently?
I think if someone's not bringing this up when I'm working with my customers or prospective customers, I think there's a problem. The magic number I've really been hearing that they want everyone performing at in terms of like rep quota attainment is like averaging 80%, or we're having a conversation, right? Especially as we move from this world of like growth at all costs potentially to this world of efficiency and magic numbers, meaning more for fundraising than just net ARR. It's top of mind for everyone, and if it's not, it probably should be.
Yep, for sure. Wonderful. And so then the last thing I would note to folks here is that it's really unfair to those underperformers. And you might kind of be like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean I'm getting them extra chances? I know that I agree that it's unfair to the top performers. It's actually not fair to the underperformers as well, because you're kind of hiding from them the fact that like this isn't going to work out, and like that there's an opportunity for them to move on to do something that is more performant, and better for their career. And it's like hiding the ball there is like, it's not doing them a favor. It's not doing you a favor, and certainly isn't doing your job as a leader. And I think that this is something like, I don't know, the head of RevOps at a company called Lean Data, Don Oppos, always tells people this story about, the way that he got into sales operations is he one of his sales managers kind of took him aside. I can't remember if it was at Yammer or when he was at MuleSoft, and literally was like, Don, I love you, man. Like, you're super thoughtful and analytical, but I just don't think you're the most amazing rep in the world, and I don't see it actually going, like, I don't think it's changing anytime soon. And Don kind of had this realization, and he was like, you know what? You're not wrong, right? And he got into sales operations, and he's been absolutely fantastic in sales operations ever since. And so I think that just kind of goes to show you why that's why that's so important. Peter, do you have any kind of like experience with something like this?
I mean, I think the example or kind of the message I would pass from like being an IC at this point in my career, like two managers and sales leaders out there, is like that underperformer knows, right? Like
Yes.
it's not a shocker to them. They don't like how it feels to be underperforming. They know they're not doing what they need to be doing, but a lot of people are scared of change, right? So like they're going to sit there and continue to be miserable themselves. Back to the idea of like pulling down team morale. So it's like it's a better service to everyone just to like hurry up and have the conversation about like how are we going to fix this, or like do you want to do something else?
Yep. Yep. Totally. Um, yeah. And so I think hopefully kind of the takeaway from this is that like these are all the really like serious negative impacts, right? The negative implications of not managing performance, which is extraordinary. Like, it's your job as a sales manager or an SDR manager or a leader. Like, this is literally your job. Like, you're not there to be a super rep, and you're not there to be like a babysitter, and you're not there to be a cheerleader. There are parts of those things, but your job is to measure, manage, and improve performance. And if you're not doing these things, like, you're not doing your job. Um, and so one of the things that we talk about here at Atrium is like the best way to identify performance issues such that you can tackle them. And if they can't tackle them and fix them, and if they can't be fixed, you'll know that they can't be fixed, is by using data and metrics. And so just kind of like a quick little advertisement for Atrium here. One way to think about something, like, we believe that managers need to be data driven. So SDR, AE, AMCSM managers need to be data driven. What that means is they need every KPI needed in order to instrument their team. But then more importantly, what they need is software that monitors those KPIs, right? So it's one thing to have like a wall of charts that you're not going to be paying attention to. It's another thing to have something paying attention to this stuff for you, such that you can tracking progress towards goals, telling you when something is up proactively, like, oh, this rep's win rate is dramatically lower than everybody else's. I'm gonna bump you about that, right? This rep's activity is much lower than everybody else's. And then also doing performance diagnosis, right? So root causing. So what we kind of say about that is that Atrium helps AE and SDR managers, leaders and reps use metrics to improve team performance. We do it with hundreds of organizations. And so one of the things that's really cool about that is really great impacts come out of that. Like, so Gainsight is a customer of ours. They've used Atrium to resurrect millions of dollars in stock opportunities that were kind of hiding out of sight. Envoy is another customer of ours. They've used Atrium in order to double meeting volumes on the AE team. Something that in the current environment, making sure that the AEs are nice and busy and taking care of business is important. And they've nearly doubled the meeting volume as a result. And then dramatically reduce their pipeline hygiene issues as well, as has WorkRamp there. And so the thing that we're going to talk about here is like how to tackle these performance issues and like how to do that in an effective fashion. So how do you deal with performance issues? So first and foremost, it's really important to have time on your calendar to do this. One of the things that we talk about here at Atrium is we have an internal term in our sales organization that calendar is destiny. And so making sure that you have time on the calendar there with your reps, ideally in a one-on-one, is really important. And this is different than doing pipeline management or like pipeline review, which is oftentimes the problem is that managers will frequently use pipeline or like their one-on-one space for pipeline hygiene, or sorry, for pipeline inspection and deal strategy, which is important, but it's not the only thing. And so having separate time on the calendar for those coaching conversations end up being really important. Making sure that there's clear expectations about levels of performance, and that's not just bookings, but the precursors as well. We expect you to have this many customer facing meetings on a weekly basis. We expect you to have this many first customer meetings on a monthly basis. We expect you to be touching around this number of ops on a weekly basis. SDRs, we expect you to be doing this many calls on a daily basis, this many emails on a daily basis. So making sure that you're clear about those levels of performance, and especially precursors, is extremely important. And then making sure that you have the data in place in order to inspect that and then call things out, right? When it's missing. Hey, we said that you're supposed to be having 15 customer facing meetings a month, Mr. AE. And based on like looking back against last month, it looks like you were about 30% light on that. What's going on there? Right? Like what's going on? And that's data-driven sales management right there, where you can address that, you catch it, and then that way you can address it rather than having your head in the sand. So then have that conversation, make a plan, and then loop back. Peter, anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I think just like to kind of firm this up, like for example, I was talking with an SVP of enterprise sales yesterday, and his big commentary was like, I live in Clary. I sit there and I look at pipelines nonstop, but if someone's forecast is low, I actually don't know why, and I don't have the ability to go back and figure it out. So I think taking this type of proactive, big picture performance approach really solves that problem and answers that big question of why these things are happening and how do we fix it.
Yep, 100%. Cool. So these are kind of some examples of ways that you would have time on your calendar for coaching and feedback. Yes, pipeline review is great. I like to recommend this in a communal setting, just because it's a lot. People oftentimes do this with a forecast call. It's just like a way of like rapidly making sure that that close dates are up to date, that stages are correct, et cetera, et cetera. Another place for coaching and feedback is making sure that deal strategy meetings, and those should be like, we recommend having those on a weekly basis. It's with a manager and a rep, where you're reviewing top deals that the rep feels stuck on, and then like this is deal centric coaching and feedback. It's also a great place for managers to kind of start getting a sense of like where there might be recurring issues in deals. This is not a substitute for a one-on-one. And so one-on-ones should really be like, they should not be deal reviews. They should be focused on metrics and progress on coaching initiatives. And what a coaching initiative is, it's like you've identified an issue for a given rep, like, okay, you have a pipeline hygiene problem. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure on a recurring basis every 2 weeks, we're coming back to this. And that's our coaching initiative right now. In addition to hearing about how you're feeling and how your weekend was and so on and so forth, we're also going to be talking about, hey, are your untouched ops under the, like, are they under the threshold that it's supposed to be at, right? And then of course you can do that on a quarterly basis as well. Like a big version of that is a QBR meeting as well. When you think about setting expectations, so like these are the ways of having time on your calendar to make sure that that's happening. When you're setting clear expectations about performance, a really great way of doing that is to make sure that you're just like setting suggested goals, right? And you're specifying qualitative and quantitative goals. So some examples here with respect to AEs, just kind of like rough benchmarks, like setting an expectation around customer facing meeting volume. Sometimes people are like loath to set expectations around like email activity. I think it's like less about like, hey, you have to do this, and it's more just like making sure that AEs are busy, because if they're not busy, that probably means they're not managing their ops appropriately. And then of course there's more sophisticated things as well, like quality metrics like win rate, or how well people are multi-threading, like contacts per account, et cetera, et cetera. Peter, anything you wanted to you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, I think I run into a lot of sales managers and sales leaders, like you were saying, who are like a little afraid to actually set success criteria in terms of like metrics driven goals for people. And I think the thing that really resonates with them after they think about it a little bit is like, these goals are also for the rep to help them understand how to set themselves up for success. Say,
Sure.
you're an enterprise rep running like a bunch, like 10 6-month deal cycles. Like, how do you know if you're on track and doing the right things now to, hit your quota in 6 months, right? It's hard to tell if you're doing the right activities. Goals is a great way to do that.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, like what is it? The fingerprint to success, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
making sure that this is something that our customers oftentimes come to us with. We're like, hey man, we're trying to figure out like what makes this rep right here successful? Bobby over here, like what makes Bobby so successful? Because if we could make everybody else as successful as Bobby, that would be really powerful. And then when you go and you break down Bobby's behavior into its constituent, like metrical indicators, it oftentimes becomes like super, super clear. Like, oh yeah, like Bobby here, he just has like 30% more customer facing meetings than everybody else. By the way, he's not like, going crazy. He's just like make sure that he's busy. He's got 15 customer facing meetings a week versus, a team average of like 10. Oh, and the reason why he's doing that is because he's self prospecting a lot of opportunities and he's not just sitting back on his heels waiting for SDRs to fill his calendar. Great. Now we know what our recipe of success is, and then we can document that here into various KPIs that we can then measure. The same is true on the SDR side as well. So then once you have that in place, the next thing, of course, is to inspect those metrics and diagnose those issues. So we've got that stuff in place. Now we have to actually use the data in order to say, hey, like make sure that we have a relevant metrics harness in place, and then make sure, because then we're going to use it in order to evaluate whether or not these are happening. And so examples of like this would be, hey, we want to inspect our key metrics and look for, bright spots, whether it's like an individual who's outperforming as compared to his peers, or underperformance as well. Like, hey man, this is customer facing meetings right here. You can see that this rep right here and also this rep is really kind of hitting the cover off the ball, whereas this rep down here, it's kind of like, hey, what's going on, man? And especially over a long enough time period where it's kind of like, it's statistically significant. And then also looking for trends as well, because like what can end up happening is like trends can tell you a lot. And the reason why that's important is because when you have, like, say you have a longer time period, like, a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or what have you, if somebody's at a higher level previously and they're declining in terms of their performance, well, their total is going to, their like trailing 90-day total is going to be declining over time more and more. And like it's going to take longer for that to show up. Whereas if you're looking at the trends, you can say, oh man, here's this person who's deteriorating here. Peter, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think Tyler Wallace here in the chat had a great question about this applying to SDRs too. And I think the trend stuff that you were just bringing up is even more relevant for SDRs. I see it all the time. Like, an SDR will go in and, they'll interact or sequence like 100 new accounts at the beginning of the month, and then it'll just stop. Right. Very hard to pick up on without that trend information. You need consistency.
Yep. Right. You need consistency and you need like goal setting as well. And this is why when I forget when I was talking about this recently, but this notion of like the minimally viable like measurement period for a given KPI, where it's like looking at, so to use your example there, like maybe new account engagement, like not just total accounts that you're engaging, but like the net new accounts that you're engaging is obviously a really important thing to pay attention to. Measuring that on a monthly basis, you could end up at the end of the month and like totally hosed, right? Like not realizing that. And so this is why measuring it on a weekly basis, or and like this is why progressive goal tracking is something that is really important from a functionality standpoint. Having something tell you like, hey man, this guy's not pacing towards this goal. This is something that we should be aware of because it's the 15th of the month right now. The good news is we still have 15 days left in the month in order to fix this. But if we don't get ahead of this right now, we're going to be hosed. Instead, looking back on that at the end of the month and saying, whoa, how did we end up with, how did you end up with half as many new accounts that you've interacted as everybody else? That's terrible. And now we're hosed. Like we can't get that time back ever, right? The last thing that one of the things that we talk about quite a bit here at Atrium is what we call anomaly detection, right? Like making sure that and maybe I can like make these charts a little bit bigger here, just like making sure that people that like you see when things are changing in a way that that is relevant to you. And so a good example of this would be like, hey, this rep right here has 40% fewer new opportunities that are coming into their pipe than their peers. And then this rep right here has 75% more new opportunities coming into his pipe as compared to his trailing average. And so it's those changes that end up being really important. This is why Atrium has anomaly detection built into it, because using your eyes in order to detect those things can be a little bit of a challenge. And so having software do it for you to monitor that can be really powerful. Peter, when you think about like the importance of anomaly detection and kind of how that impacts how managers manage on a day by day or a week by week basis, do you have anything to kind of share there?
Yeah, I mean, you can just see so much more, right? Like, you have the concept of the kitchen sink dashboard that you go to a sales operations person and ask for. Like,
Right.
I want it all on one dashboard, every metric you could possibly do to instrument my SDR or AE. And
Yeah.
like, you're not going to look at every single tile and notice like, oh, that's lower than it was last week, unless you're, like us and spend your Friday nights plugging that into Excel spreadsheets to track week over week. You're just going to miss things. It's better just to let statistics kind of handle that for you in a lot of cases and just say, hey, look over here, fix this, or this is going well.
Yeah,
Kudos.
exactly. Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
things that I like to say is that like, who's really good at math? Computers. Right? Like let's have the computers do like find the issues, and then let's have the humans apply the issues, right? And coach to the resolution. But but asking sales managers or SDR managers to like read the tea leaves of of giant walls of charts ends up being kind of like a sucker's game. And then the last thing that you need to do in terms of inspection, because inspection is important in order to understand what's going on, is look for like root causes. And so what that means is when you're looking for root causes, like you want to look at what the upstream driver might be. So saying, hey, we got a bookings problem, that's like insufficient. Like, oh, okay, great, tell me more. Right. What we want to understand is like, where is that bookings issues coming from? Is it coming from having too few wins? Is it coming from having too low of a sales price, an average selling price? Is it coming from having too low of a deal cycle? And so if it's coming from having too few wins, where's that coming from? Is that because it's too low of a win rate? Or is it because there's like not a sufficient number of at bats there? And so understanding and going to the quote unquote right here, we actually have these metrics inspection trees made as laminates. And actually, maybe we can drop the link into the chat here in case anybody wants to grab some of the desk references here. I think I have one on my desk right here. Is what you want to do is you want to go right and look upstream to see where that's coming from, right? So then once you've kind of diagnosed, and actually before I move on, Peter, anything to add on this? Because like this is kind of the most sophisticated kind of part of this process, where of course it can like be most challenging.
Yeah, I mean it's not easy to do, but I think where the power of this comes from is like realistically, if you're working with an IC, I fully believe in the adage of like you can only fix one thing at a time.
Oh, totally.
So like being able to actually use data to pinpoint where is this bookings problem coming from, or why is this rep creating fewer opportunities than everyone else, and being able to target one thing is really what's needed. And like data is the only way to do that. Otherwise, you're just managing by horoscope.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think that like, I mean, Peter, I know that you're a big golfer, but this is something that you see with coaching all the time and athletics is you can't, it's very difficult to focus on changing multiple things concurrently. But if you focus on a one specific thing, like, hey, look, your problem right now, like based on what we're seeing, you have a win rate problem. And the reason, and we know that your win rate problem is coming from the fact that your opportunity conversion rate out of discovery is way lower than everybody else. It's important for us to transition from a discovery conversation to talking like to depending on your sales motion, maybe it's like getting into some sort of like proof of concept or proof of value, or transitioning into some sort of commercial conversation once pain has been identified. You're not doing that right now based on the fact that I see that you have this problematic conversion rate. We need to fix that, right? And then we're going to focus on that and and then we're going to bird dog that conversion metric right there to see if your changed behavior is positively impacting that metric, right? And so then once you've identified what that issue is, so let's say that it's a conversion rate issue out of discovery there, what we want to do is make a plan and then stick with it. And this is one of the reasons why I really love 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach, is because it talks about exactly this process where you're saying, hey, this is the thing that we're working on. This is the accountability. Like these are the specific actions you're going to take. So let's say you're an organization that has like a pipeline hygiene problem, as an example, right? And because your opportunity ownership or because of opportunity inflow is declining, we want to make sure that we're doing a much better job of like working our opportunities and making sure that all of our ops have next meetings on the calendar. Great. Like that's something that we're going to work on. I want to make sure that you're having meetings on your calendar for your future ops. I'm going to set a goal and a metric. I'm going to call that the thing that we're working on. I'm going to set a metric around that and a goal around that, and then we're going to come back to it on a recurring basis in order to audit whether or not that's actually happening. And we're just going to honey badger that thing, like that thing that we're working on, until it's fixed. And if it's not fixed, well, now maybe we have a situation where like, okay, if you can't fix this thing and you can't develop a skill, like, let's say you've got an opportunity, you've got a pipeline hygiene issue with, as indicated by a bunch of untouched opportunities. It turns out that you don't have too many other opportunities. It's not like you're overwhelmed by too many opportunities in your pipe. Just it's a personal organization problem. We're going to go ahead and put time on your calendar in order to make sure that you're on a recurring basis. We're going to put 2 hours on Tuesday and 2 hours on Thursday to make sure that you're managing your pipe well. And if you're still not able to focus, like buckle down and focus in and make sure that you're touching those ops, and as indicated by continued untouched opportunity, like problematic untouched opportunity counts, well, maybe this job isn't for you, right? Like if we work on that for multiple weeks in a row, and you can't self-govern enough in order to make sure. And again, like looking at other things, like, okay, is your calendar overloaded with first meetings because you're overwhelmed and we don't have enough, there's not enough time in the week in order for you to manage those ops? Great. Calendar is destiny. Let's block that out on the calendar. If you're still not able to adhere to that and like, to follow the plan that we've put together, then maybe sales isn't for you. Right. And so this is a couple different ways of approaching that. This is a template that we have here for a one-on-one coaching meeting. And then of course, if it isn't improving, like I think in general, performance improvement plans, kind of PIPs, are they're kind of like an old school like mentality. And what I mean by that is like you should be doing continuous performance improvement. Like there shouldn't be a need to like do a PIP, so to speak, because like to use the example earlier about like pipeline hygiene, like if it turns out on a recurring basis, like we've identified the fact that you have this high number of untouched opportunities, and we've literally been talking about it every week for a month, or like every 2 weeks for like 2 months, and it's not getting better. Well, like, do we need to have a performance improvement plan? Like, I think we kind of just identified the fact that you can't follow direction, right? But in some situations, you might actually need this. Peter, you're laughing. What have you observed this kind of in your customers?
Yeah, I mean it's funny, right? Like most managers know when they have an underperforming rep. Again, like the writing's on the wall, and the faster you can get in front of it and just continuously bring up maybe not even your low performers, but your mid performers, so you never have to have like this big scary performance improvement plan conversation, like the better, right? Like it's about continuously helping your reps improve, not just when you're about to fire them or potentially fire them. Like no one wants to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that kind of goes back to this thing up here, where it's unfair to underperformers. It's super unfair to underperformers for you to like not be coaching them, not be coaching them, not be coaching them, not giving them feedback, and then all of a sudden you're like, surprise, I have a present for you. Right? It's just like, man, why didn't you tell me this? And frequently what ends up happening is like those individuals will work themselves out of the organization, right? If they know that this isn't a fit for them. But you got to be having that constant feedback, and the mechanism by which to do that constant feedback is to know where the issues are, which of course means making sure that you're doing a good job of data-driven management there. And then the last thing that we'll kind of touch on here is that when it's kind of clear, like when it is clear to kind of pull the trigger, and so and exit a rep. And so like this is a good example of like a framework used to evaluate who needs to go. Really what it kind of comes down to is you have kind of two different metrics types. So like will and skill. So will metrics are going to be like email or sorry, activity metrics like email volume, meeting volumes, call volumes, et cetera, et cetera. Frequently, you see this in SDRs. So like SDRs who um, do insufficient calling behavior as compared to their peers. Like it's very clear that they don't have the will to do the unpleasant thing that they're supposed to be doing. Maybe they're spending their time doing other things. They're spending time doing research, or they're like not at their desk and they're walking around and so on and so forth. But it like that's signifiers of like unable to like have will is a good indicator. Then there's skill profile or skill metrics like email responsiveness rates, contacts per account, opportunity conversion rates with respect to account executives, et cetera, et cetera. Like those are usually indicators. Those are metrical indicators of somebody's skill profile and how good they are at doing the behaviors in question. So if you have people who have problematic metrics with respect to will and skill, those people need to go, right? Because like they're mailing it in and they're not like the skills aren't there. Well, that's kind of problematic, right? Because like usually if you don't have the will, like you're not going to be able to upskill them. Moreover, so then the next folks who to kind of evaluate and say, hey, this might not be a fit for this organization would be people who have just like a pure will deficit. And so usually what that is that's indicated by kind of like low level of activity. So meeting volumes, calling volumes, email volumes, opportunity touch volumes, all those sort of things. So essentially they're like indicators that this person is like willing to put in the calories, because usually like when somebody's unwilling to put into the calories, usually what that like they're not going to be able to put in the calories to get their skills better anyway. And so like those are that's like a hallmark of somebody who needs to go. And then the last set here is skill. And usually what that indicates is somebody who, has upskilling opportunities in question where there's deficits. So like, it might be email engagement rate for SDRs. It might be multi-threading. It might be win rate, et cetera. These things can potentially like there are indications that the behaviors are problematic or lower quality. Those can oftentimes be coached, maybe not. Like maybe somebody might not be able to surmount them. So like some people just like they're just not cut out for it, right? They can't get over themselves to have difficult conversations with folks. They're just not able to like install the backbone or get calloused enough to have commercial conversations or to cold call or deal with rejection or what have you. In which case, that's okay. We just need to make sure that we're measuring that and saying, we've been trying to manage your conversion out of discovery for a month now, and it's not getting any better in spite of the fact that we've done all this role playing and saying, this is literally these words need to come out of your mouth, and I need you to send me a clip to the call after those words come out of your mouth, and yet somehow you're not able to do that. Great. Like we probably need to move on here. Anything you would add to here, Peter?
Yeah, I think it's very dependent how this all looks actually by like the size of organization you're in. What I actually mean by that is I had a great conversation with the VP of Sales Enablement recently where she said the rep has a will and skill problem, the manager's got to deal with it. If it's a will problem, the manager's got to deal with it. If it's a skill problem, we have resources like we can help them. Granted, smaller startup, maybe this all falls on the manager. Just something to think about, like where is it worth investing these additional resources if you have them?
Yep, makes sense. Cool. Well, I think that's everything that we have to cover today. Peter, this was absolutely delightful. For folks who are interested in learning more, what I would recommend is we're going to drop a link to these various books and Yeti here. What I would say is, I hope that your takeaway from this conversation is that it's extremely important to proactively manage performance, especially in wobbly economic times, because we just don't have time to for people who are mailing it in, and so we either have to fix it or we have to offboard them. These are great resources in order to help you with that. Ideally, you can fix people, because that's the more pleasant route. We're going to go ahead and drop that. And then for folks who are interested in learning more, Atrium is an absolutely fantastic way of doing metrics-based, kind of reality-based measurement and improvement. And would welcome folks checking that out when they get a chance. Oh, hi, Elliot. How are you?
Not too bad. That was great, guys. Thanks so much. Just going to wrap things up now. Of course, do want to thank everyone for attending. Always a good time. Big thank you to our sponsor of today's event, Atrium. Do make sure to check them out. Link to their website is in the chat alongside all the other goodies. Give me 1 second to actually grab all those links. Yeah, so yep, just drop all those links in the chat. Just grab any goodie that looks good to you. Big thank you to Pete and Peter, say that 5 times fast, for providing content. Recordings and key takeaways will be available on our page shortly alongside the deck. I know Tyler was asking that in the chat. And also don't forget to check out our upcoming events. We'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.